Usually when we think about a high-stakes interrogation, there's this expectation of a really direct verbal exchange.
Right, like a lawyer asking pointed questions on the stand.
Exactly. A lawyer asks a question, the witness gives an answer, and a stenographer records it. It's visible. It's audible. I mean, it is a completely transparent transaction.
Yeah, you know exactly what the test is.
Right. But step into the theological landscape of, like, 19th century Persia, and that whole courtroom model just completely shatters. We are looking at a world steeped in layers of unspoken tests, hidden meanings, and silent challenges.
It is a completely different paradigm.
It really is. In April 1846, a renowned scholar walked into a room with a silent test designed to expose a fraud, only to walk out with a document that attempted to rewrite the very architecture of the cosmos.
Oh.
And that document is the Tafsir-e Surah Kawthar.
And to understand the sheer magnitude of that document, we are going to explore the profound and honestly truly mind-bending symbolic meaning of Kawthar.
Which means abundance, right?
Exactly, a term essentially translating to abundance. Our source for this journey today is a massive, incredibly dense translation of this commentary written by the Bab. What makes this text so audacious is that it takes a tiny 3-verse scripture from the Quran, Surah of Kawthar, and explodes it into this vast, complex, metaphysical map.
Okay, so I want to set the scene for you listening right now. Put yourself in that room for a moment. Imagine you were the one being tested. The examiner doesn't say a single word to you. And in response to that silence, you spontaneously write a masterpiece that not only answers their unspoken question, but maps out the entire universe.
From historical events to the deepest spiritual realities.
Literally letter by single letter.
Yeah, it is a staggering historical and literary flex, really. But, waiting for an unspoken test is an incredibly high-stakes gamble.
Oh, for sure.
To grasp how this text functions, we really have to look at the immediate context. So the year is 1846, the place is Shiraz, Iran, and the scholar walking into the room is Seyyid Yahya Darabi, famously known by his title Vahid. Now, he hasn't just wandered in out of curiosity. He has been sent by the Shah of Iran himself to investigate the claims of this young man known as the Bab.
And Vahid is not some low-level clerk. I mean, he is a theological heavyweight. This is a man who has memorized the traditions, mastered the jurisprudence, and sits at the absolute pinnacle of the religious establishment.
He's the ultimate insider.
Right. So when he walks into a room, he brings the weight of centuries of scholasticism with him.
Which is precisely why his method of testing the Bab is so fascinating. I mean, Vahid doesn't try to trap him with a complex, convoluted debate out loud.
He doesn't pull out a massive book and say, explain page 400.
Exactly. He decides on an unspoken challenge. He secretly resolves in his own heart to ask the Bab for a commentary on the Surah of Kawthar. He tells absolutely no one.
Wow.
He simply sits in the presence of the Bab, holding this silent demand in his mind, waiting to see if this young claimant possesses actual divine insight or if he is just, a very persuasive speaker.
It's the ultimate poker face. Because if Vahid's mind remains blank to the Bab fails.
That's it. Test over.
But the text tells us the spontaneous revelation happens immediately. The Bab anticipates this completely unspoken request. He doesn't just address it, He reveals the entire massive commentary in a single sitting.
Writing rapidly and reading it aloud as it just flows from him.
The commentary, therefore, isn't just an explanation of a text, is it?
No, not at all. The Bab frames this act of creation as an enacted proof.
Enacted proof. Let's unpack that.
So he is making a radical argument about the nature of authority itself. He is claiming that true divine authority doesn't come from inherited scholastic credentials. It doesn't come from how many books you've read or from the approval of the clerical establishment.
Yeah.
It comes from the raw, immediate power of revealed speech.
He's bypassing the entire academic structure. He's essentially saying, I don't need to show you my diploma because I am showing you the fire right now.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But if we strip away the traditional metrics of authority, the degrees, the memorized texts, how does anyone actually measure what is true? If you're the person listening to this right now, how do you know what to believe?
Well, that question leads directly to the core epistemic crisis that the Bab addresses in the text. He introduces the concept of the balance, or mizan.
Mizan.
Yeah. In an age where every rival sect and faction is quoting the exact same ancient scriptures to prove completely contradictory points, the Bab argues that texts alone are entirely insufficient.
Because you can twist them to mean whatever you want.
Exactly. If you and I are locked in a debate and we both quote the same verse to prove opposite realities, the book itself is no longer helping us adjudicate the truth.
Because everyone is bringing their own ruler to the table. Like, if I have my ruler and you have yours and they have different measurements, how do we know whose ruler is actually calibrated correctly?
And the Bab claims to be that calibrated ruler. He claims to be the living balance that adjudicates these claims. The truth, he argues, is established not by looking backward at old texts and, endlessly debating their grammar.
Right, getting lost in the weeds.
Yeah, but by the living criterion of the manifestation in the present moment. Certainty is relocated from the dusty past to the immediate, vibrating present.
You know, that dynamic reminds me of watching a master jazz musician.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Because a true jazz genius doesn't prove their brilliance by stopping the concert, pulling out a degree from a conservatory and passing it around the audience.
No, they play.
Exactly. They prove it by improvising an impossible, mind-bending solo live on stage, reacting to the room, reacting to the silence. The proof isn't something you read about later. I mean, the proof is in the air, vibrating in your ears in real time. You don't need the degree because the immediate creation of the music is just undeniable.
The jazz improvisation is a powerful way to model what is happening here, definitely. Because the Bab is explicitly challenging Vahid and the entire scholastic establishment he represents to look at the immediate, spontaneous creation of these verses.
To look at the solo.
Right. The Bab points out that the learned scholars of the age, with all their immense training, cannot produce even a single letter of this kind of spiritually charged text spontaneously. He is enacting the proof, improvising the impossible solo right in front of the ultimate examiner.
Okay, so we have the dramatic setup. We understand the stakes of the silent test for you as a listener. But now we have to really look at the mechanics of the text itself. When the Bab starts writing this commentary, he doesn't just provide a standard dictionary definition of the word Kawthar.
No, not at all.
He deploys a multi-tiered hermeneutic method. We are moving from the zahir, the outward meaning, into the batin, the inward hidden depths.
Let's start with that outward station, because the Bab grounds Vahid in familiar territory first, which is smart.
You have to start somewhere recognizable.
Exactly. The Surah of Kawthar is only 3 short verses. Essentially, it reads, "Verily, we have given thee abundance, Kawthar, therefore pray unto thy Lord and sacrifice. Verily, thy enemy is the one cut off."
Okay, so if I am a 19th century Shia scholar like Vahid, how am I historically mapping those 3 verses?
So in the outward Shia reading provided in the text, Kawthar, the abundance, represents the bestowal of the guardianship of Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad.
Okay, because he is seen as the wellspring.
Right, he is the wellspring from which the succeeding imams flow. Then the command to pray signifies the Imat of Hassan, whose leadership was characterized by quiet devotion and treaty rather than, open warfare.
And the command to sacrifice.
That points directly to the tragic martyrdom of Hussein at Karbala, which is the ultimate sacrifice in Shia history.
Got it.
Finally, the one cutoff refers to the enemies of these imams, those who severed themselves from this lineage of truth.
It's a very clean, historically coherent map. I mean, It speaks directly to Vahid's specific theological training. It shows the Bab has total mastery over the traditional interpretations.
Yeah.
But this is just the launchpad, right? The text doesn't stay in the past.
Not at all. Once that baseline is established, the commentary violently pivots to the inward station. The metaphysical layers unfold, and the term Kawthar begins to ascend through this hierarchy of meanings.
It isn't just a historical bestowal anymore.
Right. First, Kawthar signifies the Prophet Muhammad. Then it shifts to signify Ali, then Fatimi, then the entire sequence of the Imams, then the Qum, the Promised One.
It keeps zooming out.
And finally, at the ultimate summit of this interpretive ascent, the Bab declares that Kawthar signifies his own self.
Wait, I have to stop you there, because that is a massive, potentially dangerous leap. He is taking a 1,200-year-old sacred text, a text revered by millions of people, and saying, actually, at its deepest, most profound metaphysical level, this scripture is entirely about the person sitting in front of you right now. Isn't there a risk of that sounding like incredible hubris to a scholar like Vahid?
It is an incredibly radical method of self-referential exegesis, and the stakes of claiming it are quite literally life and death.
Yeah.
But within the framework the Bab is building, it isn't hubris. It is the necessary logical endpoint of his claim to be the living balance.
Hmm.
If he is the localized manifestation of the divine will on earth, then the ultimate meaning of divine abundance, Kawthar, must culminate in his revelation.
I see.
Kawthar becomes a living, breathing reality in the present moment, embodied in the author of the commentary. He is bringing the entire cosmic drama of the past out of history and into his own immediate identity.
It is like looking into a fractal. You start by zooming in on a historical event, the lineage of the Imams, and suddenly you see the entire religious cosmos replicated inside it. And then you zoom in further on that cosmos, and the center of the image resolves, and it's the author themselves staring right back at you.
The fractal is the perfect conceptual model for this text because the Bab pushes this exact phenomenon to the most microscopic level imaginable.
Literally.
Having shifted the meaning of the verses, the text moves past the words themselves and zeroes in on the very alphabet. We enter an intense, letter-by-letter deconstruction of this surah.
This the part of the deep dive that genuinely broke my brain, because we are talking about analyzing the ink on the page.
Yes. The Bab makes a staggering claim regarding the letters. He states that even an ant, if it possessed the spiritual desire, could expound infinite meanings from the blackness of the text's eye.
Think about that image for a second. The mere physical speck of black ink holds an infinite depth of divine reality.
He writes that for every single letter of the Quran, there is an interpretation encompassing all that God's knowledge encompasses of the atoms of all things.
That an ant looking at a microscopic speck of ink could extrapolate the blueprint of the entire universe. It is a beautiful, almost overwhelming image. But how does that actually work in practice? The Bab doesn't just leave it as a poetic idea, right? He actually performs this deconstruction on the 43 individual letters of the Surah of Kawthar.
To understand how this functions, we really have to look at the tradition of hurufism or letter mysticism that the Bab is utilizing and entirely repurposing here.
Okay, let's get into that.
In this framework, Arabic letters aren't just phonetic symbols that make sounds. They carry numerological weight through the abjad system, and they serve as literal thresholds to divine realms. The shape of the letter, its position, its grammatical function, all of it is structurally significant.
Let's get into the mechanics of that. Let's look at the first letter of the Surah, the Alif.
The Bab designates the first alif in the surah as representing the fire of origination. He calls it the first atom in the rank of decree, and describes it as a clear mirror wherein the world beholdeth all stations.
Okay, let's unpack why that specific mapping makes sense. So the letter Aleph in Arabic is just a single, straight, vertical stroke.
Like a pillar.
Exactly. It looks like a pillar, or the number one. It stands completely upright. So if it represents the fire of origination, fire is an element that naturally moves upward. It is the raw spark, the first mover of creation. The Aleph is the first physical stroke of the pen on the page, just as fire is the first spark of the cosmic architecture.
That structural logic is exactly what the Bab is highlighting. The shape and the meaning are perfectly intertwined. From there, he moves to the letter Nun. The Nun represents the air of invention and the light of God in the niche.
And structurally, the letter Nun is shaped like a crescent or a bowl, with a single dot hovering inside or above it. It literally looks like a niche holding a solitary light.
Precisely. The fire of origination, the Aleph, moves into the air of invention, the Nun. The initial spark is now being held and given space to breathe and expand.
It's sequential.
Yes. Then he looks at a letter like Vav. The Bab says the Vav represents the absolute, universal, eternal guardianship.
Because in Arabic grammar, the word wa, or the letter Vav, functions as the conjunction and. It is the linguistic connective tissue. So metaphysically, it represents the guardianship, right? The divine link that connects the heavens to the earth, connecting all disparate things together.
You are tracking the exact mechanics of the text perfectly. The Bab links these letters to highly specific metaphysical stages of divine emanation. Creation isn't just a sudden explosion, it is a meticulously ordered cascade.
What are those stages?
He lists these stages as will, purpose, destiny, decree, permission, term, and book.
Okay, I want to slow down here and deduce how these stages flow into one another, because if we aren't careful, will, purpose, destiny, decree, it just sounds like a list of philosophical synonyms. How do we get from the abstract concept of will all the way down to a physical book?
We have to view it as a sequence of increasing localization. It starts with will. Will is the absolute, primal, unconditioned spark of divine desire. It is the pure energy of origination, but pure energy has no shape.
Right, so will requires purpose. Purpose takes that raw, unconditioned spark and gives it a specific intention. It aims the energy.
Exactly. Once you have an aimed intention, you need parameters. That is destiny.
Destiny isn't like a final fatalistic outcome in this context, right?
No, no, it is the conceptual boundary. It is the architectural limit of what the creation will be.
So destiny is the outline, the blueprint. Then comes decree. If destiny is the blueprint, decree must be the active authoritative command to actually execute the building. It's the order going out.
And once the order goes out, it requires permission. Permission is the removal of all metaphysical and physical obstacles, allowing the decree to actually unfold in reality, which leads to term.
Term implies a limit, a lifespan.
Yes. The creation is given a specific duration in time and space. And finally, all of this coagulates and solidifies into the book. The book is the physical, tangible manifestation of that original, unconditioned will, now fully realized in the material world. The cosmos is literally built out of these letters and these cascading stages.
But playing devil's advocate here, standing in the shoes of a skeptical listener, or Vahid himself, isn't there a massive danger of getting totally lost in the weeds?
How do you mean?
Well, if I stare at a single letter Aleph and start extrapolating about the fire of origination, and the next letter is the air of invention, how do I keep from drowning in information overload? Without a key, this intense granular letter mysticism could easily devolve into pure subjective word salad. Anybody can claim a letter means anything.
That is the exact trap of unchecked mysticism, and the Bab is acutely aware of it. And this circles us all the way back to the concept of the balance.
Ah, right. The mizan.
Exactly. The letters in this commentary are not arbitrary. They aren't random word associations born from a hyperactive human intellect playing games. They are anchored entirely to the central guiding presence of the divine will.
The manifestation.
Yes, the reason the reader doesn't drown is because the manifestation, the Bab, is providing the absolute structure. The letters only contain this infinite fractal meaning because they are being illuminated by the divine in that specific moment. The balance calibrates the meaning so it doesn't spin out into chaos.
So the letters are the raw building blocks, but they're constructing a very specific, highly structured cosmic reality. They're building a map.
And we need to look closely at that map because the terminology the Bab uses to define the cosmos is incredibly precise. To unlock these hidden meanings, he clarifies a descent through 4 specific metaphysical realms.
From the top down.
Exactly. We start at the absolute highest level and cascade downward.
Let's lay out the terrain for the listener.
First is Lahut. This is the realm of deity, the absolute divine essence itself. It is completely unknowable, infinite, and beyond all human comprehension or description.
The ultimate unreachable summit.
From Lahut, the divine reality descends to Jabarut. This is the realm of power, often referred to as the Empyrean. Below Jabarut is Malakut, which is the realm of dominion or the kingdom. It is the angelic realm, the world of pure spiritual forms. And finally, the descent reaches Nasut, which is the realm of humanity, the physical, mortal world we currently inhabit.
To make sense of those realms, I keep coming back to the analogy of the Earth's atmosphere. Because if you just hear Lahut, Jabarut, Malakut, Nasut, it can feel terribly abstract.
I love this analogy. How does the atmospheric model map onto the cosmology?
Think about Nasut as the troposphere. It's the air we breathe right now. It's dense. It's where all the weather happens. It's messy. It's physical. We are uniquely adapted to survive here.
Yeah.
Now, if you start to ascend spiritually, you move into Malakut, which is like the stratosphere. The air gets incredibly thin. The physical storms of Nasut disappear. Ascend further into Jabarut, and you are in the mesosphere. Almost no physical matter left, just pure energetic forces.
And Lahut?
Lahut is deep space.
Yeah.
It is the vast, infinite, absolute vacuum of the cosmos. A human being cannot survive in the vacuum of deep space. If we were exposed directly to the unfiltered reality of Lahut, we would be obliterated.
Absolutely.
And if you think about it, the light of the sun, the Kawthar, the abundance, originates out there in the vacuum. In deep space, that light is blinding, radioactive, and entirely unfiltered. But as it cascades down through Jabarut, filters through Malakut, and finally hits Nasut, the atmosphere changes it. It scatters the light, softens it, and turns it into the warm, breathable daylight that actually gives us life on Earth. The abundance is the light making that entire journey.
That analogy captures the exact mechanism of divine emanation the Bab is describing. The essence of the light does not change. It is always the sun, but it manifests differently depending on the atmospheric realm it is passing through.
It has to, or we couldn't handle it.
Right. And the Bab uses a fascinating alchemical metaphor to describe how a human soul can actually process this light without being destroyed. He refers to this knowledge as the red elixir or red sulfur.
Red sulfur. So in traditional alchemy, red sulfur is the legendary mythical catalyst required to transmute base corrupted metals into pure gold.
Exactly. The Bab is saying that comprehending this multi-tiered reality, recognizing the manifestation, is the spiritual red sulfur. Through it, the soul undergoes a transmutation. It allows the individual in a suit to build the spiritual capacity, to build the spacesuit, to use your analogy, to engage with the light of Malakut and Jabarut. It grants possession of both this physical world and the spiritual hereafter.
But even with the red sulfur, dealing with terms like Jabarut can still feel intellectually heavy. To ground this massive cosmology, the text pivots to some incredibly vivid sensory metaphors.
Which brings us to the rivers.
Yes. It takes this cascading light from deep space and translates it into something visceral. The ultimate metaphor for this abundance is the imagery of 4 flowing rivers.
The Bab roots this in a deeply familiar Islamic framework. The Quran describes paradise as containing 4 specific rivers. But the Bab reinterprets these rivers entirely, pulling them out of a static afterlife and turning them into dynamic metaphysical forces. A river of water, a river of milk, a river of honey, and a river of wine.
Let's deduce the mechanics of these liquids, because the Bab's progression here is highly intentional. Let's start with the river of water.
The Bab describes the water as unpolluted. It represents divine unity and pre-existence. He specifically notes that it has no color due to its intense, absolute purity.
That tracks perfectly. Water is a base element. It is the absolute foundation of all biological life. It is colorless, shapeless, and completely unconditioned. It is the primal source. So the water is the unity. What about the milk?
The milk represents prophetic communion. It corresponds to the outward name of God, the living. The text describes it as the river of longing, attraction, and love.
If we look at the biology of milk, it requires a mother. It requires a biological, life-sustaining bond. It is the very first nourishment given to an infant. So the Bab is using milk to show how a prophet nourishes a nascent infant spiritual community. It is the bond of communion that keeps the new soul alive.
Yes, it is the active nurturing of the believer. From the milk, we move to the river of honey. The Bab says the honey is clarified. It represents eloquent discourse and the inward name of God, the quickener.
Again, look at the process. Honey requires intense collective synthesis. Bees have to gather nectar from thousands of different sources, bring it together, and clarify it into something entirely new. Honey is sweet, it is famously curative, and it doesn't spoil.
It preserves.
Right, so eloquent discourse, divine wisdom, is the clarification of all spiritual truth into something sweet and healing that brings the dead heart back to life.
The quickener.
That synthesis is the exact function of divine revelation. Finally, we reach the river of wine. The wine is described as crimson. It represents mystic intoxication. It corresponds to the inward name of God, the causer of death.
The causer of death. Because unlike water, milk, or honey, wine requires violence to be created. You have to crush the grapes. You have to seal them in the dark and let them ferment. And when you drink it, it alters your consciousness. It actively changes your state of mind.
Precisely. But the death here is not physical mortality.
What is it then?
It is the crushing of the human ego. It is the spiritual obliteration of the selfish desires that happens when one is completely consumed by divine love. The fermentation is the soul's transformation. So divine abundance, the Kawthar, isn't a vault filled with gold coins waiting for you after you die. It is a flowing, dynamic, violently transformative life force. It is these 4 rivers pouring out from the divine will, cascading down through the realms.
And here's the most profound pivot in this section of the text. The Bab says these rivers are not flowing in some geographically distant future afterlife paradise. He declares that this water of Kawthar flows within the very heart of the receptive reader. The text invites you to experience this alchemical transmutation internally right now.
But how do you actually engage with that? What does it mean for Vahid sitting in that room in 1846, or for you, our listener tuning in today? How do you practically drink from a written text?
The act of drinking in this theological framework is the act of pure recognition. Recognizing the truth of the manifestation is the act of drinking. When you perceive the divine origin of the verses, when you look past the outward letters and see the inward fire of origination, you are internalizing the abundance. You are drinking the water of unity, the milk of communion, the honey of wisdom, and the wine of ego death.
It is a radical shift from passive reading to active, participatory spiritual perception. And this brings us to the final destination of the journey. We have to look at what this flowing water ultimately becomes, and the stark, chilling warning given at the end of the surah.
Throughout this massive commentary, Kawthar undergoes a complete symbolic transformation. It begins as a historical term for abundance, but the Bab transforms it into the living water of life, and the Bab asserts that he himself is the physical embodiment of that life-giving force on earth.
And he doesn't describe his role passively, does he? He uses some incredibly dramatic, almost martial imagery to describe himself.
He really does. He refers to himself using the image of the Persian youth on the steed of combat. He writes, "Verily this Persian youth hath mounted the steed of combat and hath come with the instruments of war in the arena of glory, raising his voice on high."
But the battlefield isn't physical, and the weapons aren't swords.
No. The battlefield is the human soul, and the weapons are verses, proofs, and the blinding light of the red sulfur. It is a spiritual battle cry. He is aggressively challenging the complacency of his age. He is calling out the religious scholars who hide comfortably behind their memorized books while utterly failing to recognize the living, breathing truth standing right in front of them.
Which gives intense weight to the final verse of the surah.
Yeah.
Verily, thy enemy is the one cut off. How does the Bab map that warning?
It is a solemn, devastating judgment against those who actively oppose the divine truth. It serves as the counterbalance to the overwhelming mercy of the four rivers.
Right, because if there's an abundance, there has to be a deprivation.
Exactly. To be cut off is to be completely severed from the flowing Kawthar. It is to choose to remain in the arid, desiccated desert of your own ego and literalism, dying of thirst, while the water of life is freely available just inches away.
There's a profound tragedy in that, the idea that the divine proof is present, but entirely hidden by our own blindness.
The Bab evokes a concept from Islamic tradition, suggesting that the divine proof might walk in their markets and step on their carpets while they do not recognize him. It immediately recalls the story of Joseph, standing in power, completely unrecognized by his own brothers who threw him in the well.
Wow.
The tragedy is that the divine reality is often wrapped in the mundane, hidden in plain sight, waiting for a heart pure enough and a mind quiet enough to actually see it.
It's like we were standing at the bottom of an infinite ocean, but we're dying of thirst because we refuse to open our mouths and drink. A tragedy of Vahid's peers is that they were so obsessed with the map of the ocean that they forgot what water tasted like.
That's a profound way to put it.
Let's trace the massive architecture of what we just explored for our listener. We started in a quiet room in Shiraz with a scholar holding a silent test. We watched the Bab shatter the courtroom model of authority, bypassing centuries of scholasticism to enact an immediate living proof.
The jazz solo.
The jazz solo. We followed a multi-tiered hermeneutic that took 3 simple verses and mapped the entire history of Shi'ism before violently pivoting inward to make the text a mirror of the author himself.
Zooming in on the fractal.
Yes, and we zoomed into the microscopic level, watching the Arabic alphabet construct the cosmos, from the Alif's fire of origination down through the architectural stages of will, purpose, destiny, and decree. We used the red sulfur to survive the descent from the absolute vacuum of Lahut down into the dense atmosphere of Nasut.
We deduced the mechanics of the 4 rivers of paradise: water, milk, honey, and wine.
And realized they're flowing inside our own consciousness. And finally, we watched the Persian youth mount the steed of combat, warning us not to become the ones cut off from the living water walking in our very markets.
If there's a core mechanism to take away from this entire commentary, it is that this text is demanding we fundamentally restructure how we perceive reality. It challenges us to look past the zahir, the outward, flat surface of things. Whether we are analyzing ancient religious texts, historical movements, or the very people we interact with daily, there is an urgent call to seek the batin, the inward, hidden depth. It is an invitation to stop reading the universe passively and start perceiving it actively.
And that is exactly what I want you, the listener, to mull over as we close. The Bab demonstrated that a single 3-verse chapter of Scripture could hold infinite cascading universes of meaning. He drilled all the way down to the grammatical shape of a single letter, revealing the literal fire of creation locked inside a microscopic speck of black ink.
It really makes you pause.
It does. If reality is truly this fractal, if the absolute infinite is folded into the absolute smallest of things, what hidden, profound, world-shattering depths are waiting to be uncovered in the mundane words you use every day, the silent tests you face, or the quiet, seemingly ordinary moments of your own life? The water is already flowing, We just have to learn how to drink. Keep questioning the surface, keep looking closer, and keep diving deep. Until next time.